Hello everyone, it is B with the B Code back at you again with another video. First of all, as usual, thank you to my subscribers and everyone who watches my videos. Please do not hesitate to do what? Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment in the comment section. So, I was watching a Netflix series called The Queen's Gambit. Now, it was a short series, so I was able to watch the entire series, in a matter of, a few hours. Well, I wouldn't say a few hours, but I was able to watch the whole series, right? You have to be a person that likes chess in order to watch this series. And me, myself, I like chess. And it was a beautiful story to me about an orphan who learned how to play chess and went on to win, against the baddest person in the world. So she became, the top chess player. So anyhow, that is not what I want to talk about in this video. As you can see by the title, the traditional happy wife hoax. The traditional wife was a hoax, right? I'm going to explain to you why I say this. But before I do that, I'm just going to elaborate a little bit more on the Queen's Gambit. Even though it was a story, it appeared to be fiction and nonfiction. Fiction in the fact that all traditional wives weren't suffering in this fashion, but a lot were. And then there were some questions that came to mind, like we're always focusing on the women's side of the traditional life, but we never really looked at the man's side of the traditional life. So in doing this video, talking about the wife, I want to first start off by talking about the traditional husband, because that was also a hoax. All right, so there was a couple in the series. They were childless. I guess the wife had gotten pregnant. It didn't say when she lost the child, but the child is no longer living. So, there's such a twist to this aspect of the story. It's kind of like, wow. So anyway, they went to the orphanage and adopted the girl that is the chess player, right? Now, she is not a little child. She is a high schooler, right? So one would say, why would they go and adopt a high schooler? People usually, want children, especially children under 5. So anyway, in looking at the man's aspect of the traditional home, when they came from picking up the little girl or the girl that they adopted, the husband immediately walked in the house before the wife and the newly adopted girl, plopped right into this chair, and began to read the paper. So what that told me was that he's not happy there. He never smiled throughout the entire series. Right here in this still shot I took, he appears to be miserable, right? There is nothing in that house that says husband. Not the decorations, nothing. Look at the wallpaper. The wallpaper is full of flowers, right? So how do we know that men back then wanted to take a wife and have somebody to take care of while they work, right? How do we know that some men didn't want to be fancy, footloose, and free, right? So when back then, a lot of young adults were probably forced into marriage. On the man's side, once he turns 18 and once he is able to get a job and go to work, um, was considered an adult, the parents pretty much wanted them out of the house. And so, since the sons weren't taught homemaker skills, they needed to hurry up and find a wife so that she could come in and maintain the home, because this is what the girls were being taught, right? They weren't being taught how to go out and find a job. They weren't encouraged to go to college. They weren't encouraged to be independent. They were basically raised and trained to take care of a household and a man. So when you're looking at it from the man's perspective, they pretty much were forced into these traditional relationships as well. And then, of course, back then it looked kind of strange for a man to live alone and not have a wife. Of course, this is when homosexuality was frowned upon. So in order to present a certain image and live up to that image, it was pretty much man and woman. So this guy right here is very, very, very miserable in this marriage, in this home. He was they didn't say what he did for a living, but back then, since there was no internet, the paper was the only place to advertise. I think, or it appeared, that he was a traveling salesman going around, state to state and, introducing people into a new product for a company. So in this situation, he pretty much stayed out of town, would come home for short periods of time and then leave again, which of course would leave the wife at home. And this happened a lot. There were a lot of traveling husbands, and this is where the family in another state came in at, right? They're traveling out of town. They're entertaining the company of another single woman. He's given her either she knows he's married, or he's given her excuses as far as why he can't marry her. And then, she just basically starts having children for him. And this is where we have the family in another state. So like I said, a lot of these traditional husbands, they weren't happy. They just did what society told them they were supposed to do. Now, look at the decorations, all flowers. Look at the colors. Look at the curtains. Even in the other still image, the house was decorated with kitty cats and a very, very, very feminine home. Why? Because the wife spent the majority of time in the house. The husband spent the majority of the time outside of the house. And when he came home, it was usually to eat and go to bed. So you have a situation to where it's almost like this is not a happy marriage. This is only for appearances only. And then this is where the man cave, what we call it today, this is where that man cave comes in at. Since she had the whole house decorated like only women live there, feminine, he would usually have a room in the house that belonged to him. The den, his office, the basement. And if you really look at a lot of the programs of today, that are showing a married couple with children, what does the house usually look like? It looks like it looks like um, only a woman lives there. And what's usually the question from the kids? Mom, where's dad? Oh, he's in the den. Or oh, he's in the study. Or oh, he's in his office. So the husband usually spent the majority of his time in the office or in his man cave, and the woman spent the majority of her time, prancing around the house or in the kitchen cooking or washing or doing those types of things. So, a lot of times it's almost as if nobody really wanted a traditional life. Nobody really wanted to be forced into servitude to one another. The man was forced to go out to work to financially provide for a family that he probably didn't even want, but was forced into because that's what everybody else was doing. And then the woman, since she had no skills, wasn't allowed to work, she was definitely in a marriage that she didn't want to be in, probably having some children that she didn't want to have. So this traditional thing, it's a hoax. So like I said, look at the decorations on the wall. These are flowers on the wall. Look at the bathroom. There's a sink skirt on there. There's nothing masculine. Look at the lamp. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing masculine about this house at all. So I'm saying to myself, like, how is a man supposed to be happy in a house with a bunch of flowers and feminine decorations? He's not. He's miserable. So as the story goes on, it depicts the wife. She's drinking all the time. She's home alone a whole lot because he's out of town. And in the story, he stays out of town longer and longer and longer. And then he would leave her with barely any money to survive. So she had to pretty much stretch the money until he came back from out of town. He would always take the car, so it forced her to walk or either catch the bus. I mean, it was just really a cold and lonely relationship for the both of them, right? But more hard for the wife because he had control of the finances and he also had control of the transportation. So another reason why I say the traditional housewife is a hoax is because this was a scene from one of the series, right? So the mother was vacuuming. She had on her slip. She was barefoot. She was smoking a cigarette. And she happened to see the husband coming. So she hauled ass upstairs. In this first scene, she's just vacuuming, talking to the daughter and just, doing her own thing, looking how she wants to look. Then in this second photo, you see her hightail it upstairs, right? She's like, oh, she drops everything and runs upstairs. And then in this third photo, she comes back down. She has on her pretty dress. And what else does she have on? She has on a fake ass smile. Oh, hello, dear. I didn't know you were going to be home. Oh, well, I'll get dinner started. It was a facade. It was fake. It was a fake happiness, fake wanting to be there. But what other choice did the woman have? Because, mind you, when she was young, and then when she turned 18, her parents were wanting her to get married, to get out of the house. So she had to pretty much, a lot of the times, get on the first thing smoking. or they would figure something is wrong with her. Oh my God, honey, you haven't found a husband yet. There's no one in town that you're interested in. Well, what about Joey down the street? You don't like him? Or what about so and so, the guy you used to date? You don't like him? Or, it was just a hurry up and marry, hurry up and marry, hurry up and marry so you can get out of the house type of deal. Right? And then plus, of course, there were some men who did, want to take on a wife so she can come in and take care of the house while he go to work. I'm not saying everybody back then, didn't want a wife or didn't want to be married or didn't, I'm not saying that. But I pretty much bet that this was a true depiction of how it was to be a traditional wife. You had to keep up this fake appearance. You couldn't let him see you with rollers in your hair. You couldn't let him see you without your makeup on. You couldn't let him see you well dressed. And you couldn't let him see the house in disarray, or he would be saying like, what were you doing all day? You've been at home all day. Why aren't the dishes done? Why isn't the living room clean? Why is dinner, not prepared? Or what's going on? What have you been doing all day? So it was pretty much I'm doing these things around this house only to please him. Right? So they always say, oh, men are visual. So in order to keep the husband interested, he could never see her with it all hanging out. You know what I'm saying? She had to pretty much 24/7 keep up this beautiful, in shape, happy wife persona, right? With a smile on her face. Like, oh, I'm washing all these fucking dishes, but yes, I love it with a smile. She's washing dishes with a smile on her face. She's vacuuming with a smile on her face. She's vacuuming, in her best clothes. Bitch got heels on and she vacuuming. You know what I'm saying? Strange shit that, women of today, we don't do. We don't get dressed and then clean. We clean, then we get dressed, because now you got all this dust and shit all over you. But anyhow, that's why I'm saying the traditional wife thing was a hoax. And these women were basically faking it. Now, not all of them, of course, but I bet you a lot of them were faking it, right? So then, as the girl went to school with her classmates and different things of that nature, she was, of course, more interested in chess than she was learning how to be a homemaker. And then there were the other girls, they had no interest in doing anything other than being a housewife. So like I said, this mother right here, she drank a lot and she took a lot of tranquilizers, right? It was to, I guess, keep her subdued from thinking about the fucked up life she had. She's with a man who she can tell doesn't want to be there, doesn't love her. She's feeling inadequate because the child is no longer. And, it's like living in fucking misery. And it was funny because once the daughter grew up and got grown and started, going traveling and playing chess, on one occasion, she came back home. She was out shopping and she ran into one of her old classmates, right? And so, she was married. She married her high school sweetheart or whatever. She was with her child. She had the daughter in the stroller. And what did she have beneath the stroller? She had a whole fucking bag of alcohol, which means what it was saying was that these fucking housewives, they were tricked into thinking that, they were going to get married. They were going to have this wonderful life with this man that loves her. They were going to raise beautiful children. And they were just going to be, one big happy family. Well, it appeared that that wasn't the case, right? These housewives were so miserable and so lonely that they did a whole bunch of drinking to suppress the loneliness. So I took the liberty of searching up the traditional wife and alcoholism, and I found an article that I'm going to read. So this article came out of the New York Times, and this is an article that was archived, but of course was pulled out, and it is Alcoholic Women in the Suburbs. There's more room to hide, right? It was by Irene Bakalinic. She wrote this April 29th, 1973. I mean, even moving forward, The Queen's Gambit, that series took place in 1965, 66, and 67. So it was over a 3-year span, right? So it reads, special to the New York Times, Westport, Connecticut. It is a typical day for Barbara C. There are the household chores in her well-furnished home in the prosperous Fairfield County town of Wilton, and a meeting of the garden club and marketing. Arriving home as her children return from school, she brushes aside greetings and rushes into the kitchen. Under the sink, there is a mayonnaise jar, and from it she shakily pours and quickly swallows a generous amount of bourbon, right? So they were hiding the alcohol. She has been thinking about that first drink all day. She sips a second one and is feeling an amiable buzz as the children come into the kitchen to talk. Barbara C. is an attractive suburbanite, tennis enthusiast, club woman, devoted mother, perfectionist wife. She is also a secret alcoholic. For Dorothy L. of Darien, whose alcoholism is more advanced, a major problem is the driving. She must be sober enough to get the children to music lessons, brownie meetings, little league practice. Since she needs a glass of vodka to start the day, not always easy to keep down, and another at noon, she plans her drinking around carpools. I always take the early half of afternoon carpool, she said, because I know I can't handle it later in the day. So far, she has not had an accident with her own or other children in the car. Both women put forth a tremendous and increasingly difficult effort to hide the drinking and to maintain the facade of the busy, happy suburban woman. The alcoholic woman, of course, is a problem that is peculiar to no particular type of living: country, suburban, big city, or small town. The underlying reasons of why women drink are pretty much the same everywhere, too: boredom, depression, loneliness, marital problems, children leaving home. Okay, so you guys hear that. Now, this is back in the traditional wife time, right? And it didn't just affect the suburban woman. All of these women were miserable in all of these different areas. They didn't want to be homemakers. They wanted to go out and live life, but they were forced to be at home, right? Because the man controlled the finances, so they couldn't go out and spend money without his permission, right? They didn't have the freedom to dress the way they wanted to dress, right? They couldn't go and work and explore their talents or take on a career They had to basically stay home and be the housekeeper, the maid, the babysitter, the mother, the childbearer, and the cook, right? So a lot of these women, of course, were forced into these situations because they couldn't survive without a husband, and their parents were not going to allow them to stay home and have a career. Same thing with the men. The men drank too. What did dad have in his study? Alcohol. What was in the den? Alcohol. What was in his home office? Alcohol. What was in the basement? Alcohol. So you basically had these men and women forced into these marriages and forced to be together. And what did they do in order to suppress and deal with the issues? They drank. And there's more to the facade than we think. So look at how the room is in disarray. The bed isn't made. The phone is off the hook on the bed. There's other items on the bed. Look at the bathroom. There's clothes on the floor, all over the sink. You know what I'm saying? It's in disarray, right? So on this particular day, the missus received a phone call that her husband was going to be out of town indefinitely. I mean, damn. He just fucking said, I ain't coming back. Right? He had reached his boiling point, and apparently, wherever he was more happier than being in this house full of flowers. Look at the walls. Look at the lamps. Look at the curtains, all flowers, all feminine. This man was just not happy in this situation at all. And plus, she didn't have his children. His children aren't there. So anyway, this is what I was able to put together about this particular story in the Queen's Gambit. It was his suggestion to adopt the young lady, right? Because like I said, I was wondering, like, why the fuck is they're adopting such an older girl? He already had plans of leaving, but he didn't want to leave her alone, or he wanted to make sure he left her tied down with a child, right? He probably would have left even if it was his biological child, because this man in this series, you can tell he was unhappy, he was cold, he hated his life, he hated being in that house. He was just totally uninvolved with the entire thing. So he called and he told her, listen, I ain't coming back, peace, right? Which left her what? With no finances and no car, and having to take care of a teenage girl all by herself. Now the house is paid for. All they needed to do, no, matter of fact, it wasn't paid for because they still needed to pay the mortgage, right? But look at how when she found out he wasn't coming back, because usually when he goes out of town, he's expected home at any time, right? So she pretty much kept everything, the house clean and, different things of that nature. But look at how the house looks when she finds out he isn't coming home, right? She's downstairs. She's fully dressed and cleaned and she's playing her piano, but she just says, you know what, this motherfucker ain't coming back. I can be me now. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna take these clothes off, throw them on the floor. I ain't making no fucking bed. Look at this. My night clothes all over the fucking place. You know what I'm saying? Shit, the nigga ain't coming back. I don't have to keep up the facade any longer. Right? This is why I say the traditional happy wife is a fucking hoax. These women were miserable. They were putting up a facade. They were being fake. They were faking it because they needed this man to take care of them in order to survive. And it was his way or I don't know where these women would be if they didn't have a husband, right? So that, pretty much stood out to me. And it's almost as if, and then here's the thing. She still couldn't go out and get a job, right? Without her having the husband, she would have to give the girl back to the orphanage, right? But since they were still married, they hadn't gotten a divorce. He hadn't divorced her. He just left her unable to remarry by staying married to her. They pretty much lied and said that, the husband was still around. Okay. So what ended up happening was, since the girl was such an amazing chess player, she began to um, play chess in different tournaments and win. And that's how they were able to pay the mortgage and survive. Now, listen to this part. The mother eventually died. And guess what she died of? She died of liver cirrhosis. And of course, we know why, because she was drinking. So this man knew she was sick. Of course, she had already been diagnosed with liver cirrhosis. She already knew she was sick. He knew she was sick. So what did he do? He left her because he didn't want to deal with a dying wife, and he didn't want to deal with the responsibility of burying her. So what he did was he went and adopted a teenage girl that would be able to take care of her in her times of need, be her foot soldier to go out and buy her cigarettes and, run down to the store and get this and run down to the store and get that. Now, in this story, I never saw the little girl cleaning up around the house. She pretty much, did the housework herself, but they didn't really show any of that. I'm sure on her not so good days, the young lady cleaned up. But anyhow, look at how they do you. You're sick, they leave. You can't have no kids, they leave. They're unhappy, they leave, not even giving a fuck how you're going to survive. So I think maybe this was one of the turning points. I would have to say that feminism just helped the push for allowing women to, be independent and have careers and go out and work. Because I bet you a lot of this shit was happening back then. A lot of these men were 86 in their wives, and then bam, she ain't got no skills, she ain't got no education, and how is she going to take care of herself, the kids, and a house that he left her with? Because you see how he just left her with the house. He was like, peace, I don't know what the fuck y'all gonna do, but y'all better work it out, right? So he purposely went and adopted someone that could help her. And that, I think that was just, hey, he probably didn't want to be there in the first place. But it was society forcing the hand of the man and the woman to be in this unhappy relationship. So fast forward to today. You females thinking that you're going to have a happy traditional life in a house with a man that don't give two fucks about you, that will leave you at the drop of a dime, that will leave you soon as the little girl he been watching turns 18, as soon as you have a terminal illness, as soon as you get fat, for whatever reason he wants to leave you for, you're going to be in an amazingly lot of trouble, right? So this is why we tell young girls, get your education, because if you don't, and you marry this man and come in there and be his everything while he be your nothing, when he decides that he wants to leave, which he will, you're going to be working some minimum wage job, can't even afford the environment that he left you in, or if he puts you out, you won't be able to afford your own environment. So we're not saying it to say, oh, don't get married, we hate men, or don't get an education, or get an education so you can take care of yourself. No, having an education to be able to take care of yourself in the event of what if is very important for everyone on this earth to recognize and advice to follow if this is what your country does, right? So, anyway, this, if you guys like chess, go and watch The Queen's Gambit. It was, I mean, I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. Anyway, this is B with the B Code, and I'm out.